Ben Gettleman. I'm a facilitator with Kearns and West, and our team facilitates the Russian River Water Forum, and this is part of that larger water forum effort. Let's go to the next slide. So again, this is the kickoff meeting of the group, and as many will likely recall, we did discuss the topic of resiliency during the July planning group meeting. But this is the first meeting of the subcommittee. So we really want to spend today starting at really a high level of really, I think what we're trying to do here is kind of scope out what this subcommittee could contribute in terms of resiliency of the basin, recognizing that there are a lot of efforts going on. There's a lot already being done. We do want to avoid redundancy, and that we want to make sure there's value being added. And we've heard a lot of good ideas already, and we want to continue that kind of thought process. I think that the closer we can get to some clear ideas of what this group can contribute, I think that would be to everyone's benefit. So with that in mind, we want to discuss a vision for water resiliency, so what that looks like for the basin, to talk about what the group should focus on, what potential work products or deliverables the subcommittee could develop or inform. Similar to all the sort of working groups and subcommittees of the planning group for the water forum, we have co-chairs, and so we want to identify who those co-chairs are during today's meeting. And then we also want to provide the opportunity for public observation, and there's going to be a part where also we'll invite members of the public to actually provide input using one of our tools here. So let's go to the next slide. So we're just going to ask folks to introduce themselves via the chat. So please anyone who's on the line, just please put in your name and your affiliation so we know who's here. We'll cover how to rename yourself in another slide. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is the agenda. I talked to the objectives. This is kind of the agenda to get us there. We're going to go from 1 till 3, kind of starting with a recap of the discussion we had at the July meeting, getting into the vision for resiliency and what are kind of the topics that nest within that, and then talking about what this group will focus on or potentially produce, and how it's going to be organized with co-chairs. So that's sort of the flow of the meeting for today. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so this is, we did want to just confirm and remind folks of the subcommittee purpose. So I'm not going to read it, but I'll invite you all to read it. This is captured in the charter for the planning group. There were some suggested revisions that were offered during the planning group meeting in July, and we've incorporated those. But it's really recognizing that, to some extent, the planning group is focused on informing the Potter Valley process, and recognizing that there's a lot of interest in identifying resiliency options and opportunities beyond that. So the focus of this subcommittee really is on the concepts that are outside of the Potter Valley project, that address a variety of topics that would fall within the broader category of resiliency. We can talk a little bit more about what exactly that means. And just a clarification, that the subcommittee is not a decision-making group. We're really here to share information, to build understanding, to really support collaboration, and we'll kind of see where that goes. But as of right now, the group isn't intended to decide on a specific policy or outcome. But we can talk more about that later. But just want to make sure that's clear. Okay. So for participation, and maybe some things I can clarify, the way that we've organized planning group meetings and working group meetings is that the discussions are really reserved for the members, and that members of the public are invited and welcome to observe. And with the Resiliency Subcommittee, anyone who wants to be a Resiliency Subcommittee member can just nominate themselves. So if you're not a member and you'd like to be a member, you can follow up with the facilitation team, and we can help you get kind of enrolled. For the purposes of today, we are asking those who are the conversation to be focused on those who are members. And if you're not, just please do participate, observe, and then we're going to have a Miro exercise where both members and members of the public are going to be invited to provide some input. All right, so in terms of participation for members, please do raise your hand. You know, we can keep a queue here. If you are a subcommittee member, please put an RS for Resiliency Subcommittee in front of your name so we kind of know who you are. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I think that's it. I just want to see, as I went through that pretty quickly, I just want to make sure if anyone has any questions that we can address those. Otherwise, we'll just get started with just a bit of a recap for what was discussed during the July planning group meeting. Okay, so Henry, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Ben. How's my audio?
Oh, you're good.
All good? Okay. So as many of you all know, on July 13th, at the planning group meeting, we discussed resiliency in the Russian River Basin. We had some great presentations from some of the good work that is already going on in the watershed. And then we had a pretty productive discussion. I'm going to go through at a high level what those presentations were about and some of the discussion. But if you want to review in more detail, you can find all of that information on the Russian River Water Forum website under Planning Group Meeting number 3, the recording, a PDF of the Miro, and also the meeting's slides are all available there. So we heard from 3 presenters first. John Nagel presented about the Upper Russian River Voluntary Sharing Agreement, which was an agreement between water rights holders in the Upper Russian River during the most recent drought. One of the outcomes of that was that it allowed for 5 extra weeks of irrigation in 2022 because people voluntarily shared the water that they did have a water right to. We heard from Sean White of the City of Ukiah about the city's water resiliency program, which includes surface water, groundwater, recycled water, and groundwater recharge, and learned that that has allowed the city to bring its net water use close to 0. We heard from Claire Nordley of Santa Rosa Water about the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership, which is a collaboration between 13 different utilities and has reduced residential and commercial water use by almost half in the last 25 or so years. And that's not including agricultural use. In the second half of presentations, we heard from Adrian Garialde about the Alexander Valley and Dry Creek Rancheria Recharge Project, which has a goal of diverting some flows or capturing some flows when they're high in the Russian River to recharge groundwater in the Alexander Valley, increase soil moisture there, and then send base flow back into the Russian River. We heard from Janet Pauley about some of the things that Potter Valley Irrigation District is doing to increase its resiliency in its system. And then we heard from Dawn and Jay at Sonoma Water about the FIRO, or Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations at Lake Mendocino. One of the outcomes of which was to save 19% more water in 2020 versus previously programmed releases. So I went through this pretty quickly. Again, if you have more questions about those or want to review them in more detail, I would invite you to check out the slides on the website. After those presentations, we had some great discussion. There were some suggestions about and notes about other water use reductions over the last 20 odd years. And then we posed a couple discussion questions to the group First, how can water resiliency be pursued aggressively in the Russian River Basin? And what does Russian River resiliency look like? What should be the Russian River resiliency goals in the near and long term? And then secondly, how can the Resiliency Subcommittee support in achieving the resiliency goals? We also had a question relating to the Potter Valley project, but that's not a focus of this group. So I omitted that for the focus of the group. So recapping that first discussion about how to pursue Russian River resiliency, some of the ideas raised, and this doesn't imply consensus, but some of the ideas raised were the importance of education efforts, learning to live within the water budget, land budget, and the carrying capacity of the watershed, regenerative land management practices such as prescribed fire, the value of water storage, and then some people also expressed a desire to move away from quote unquote resiliency and toward proactivity. For the second question, about how the Resiliency Subcommittee can help achieve those goals and what its focus should be, we heard some different ideas raised, including sort of an index or list of existing projects, data gaps, and water availability. We heard some interest in a water budget or the ins and outs of the watershed. We heard interest in a collaboration hub for the region to help identify new projects and also potential partnerships that could improve the basin's resiliency. And then we also heard an interest in sharing, extending the sharing agreements beyond just droughts and states of emergency. So that was a quick recap of that discussion. I just wanted to open the floor for a second if anyone has any questions or if there's something I missed that folks would like to add that they remember from that discussion. I see Michael McDeezy's hand up and then Vivian.
Yes, thank you. I was just thinking as you were talking about resiliency versus proactivity. If we're going to go down that route, I might add the word sustainability, because while resilience is great for getting past major shocks to the system, I think we're kind of implicitly talking about a sustainable system for us moving into the future. Thank you.
Absolutely. Definitely worth keeping in mind today. Vivian?
Wanted to give us a quote from Jerry Partain, who was director of the Department of Forestry. And this was relevant to forestry, but it could apply to other resources. He said, the goal of modern forestry is to manage the resource so that its benefits will continue undiminished for all future generations. That's in the Forest Practice Rules handbook.
Thank you for sharing that, Vivian. John?
Yeah, there's an element that you showed in the slide about talking about core locations or a hub, and we already have the Rush River Confluence, which is a good organization to hang that on, but then also the regional hub idea or regional collaboration. It really gives a great opportunity to drive towards grants, and we would need an organization in which we could work the grants through. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And we'll definitely get into the mechanics of this group or what a collaboration hub could look like in a bit. And we'll also introduce Elise who is on the call from Russian River Confluence in a bit to talk about that. Jay?
Yeah, I wanted to clarify one of the bullets. It's on a prior slide. You could go back. Maybe one more. No, go forward. Sorry, forward. Oh, yeah. Okay. So on the first series of bullets, the third one there, just to clarify that, it should say that Sonoma Water and partners are initiating the forecast informed reservoir operations at Lake Sonoma. In similar program to what has been implemented at Lake Mendocino.
All right.
Thanks.
Does that look better?
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks for that catch. Any other comments or additions to that recap of the discussion that we had back in July? Okay, I also, Tom sent this out ahead of the meeting, but wanted to just introduce you to a matrix that we built, which is just kind of responding to the interest we heard about what projects are already ongoing. John Nagel just mentioned Russian River Confluence, and you'll see that that is one of the projects that's listed, and just want to kind of give a general ask, sort of a take home from this meeting would be that if folks know about projects and would like to add them to this matrix, we would definitely appreciate that. And that might play into the work product for this group that we're going to discuss later. You can also email our facilitation team if you want to add directly.
Yeah, I think that Tom is going to drop that link to the matrix in the chat, so that'll be coming in a second.
Awesome. There we go. And if anyone has any issues accessing that, let us know, but it should be publicly accessible. Yeah, I think, Ben, if you think now would be a good time to introduce Elise, I think, Elise, we'd love to hear from you just a little bit about Russian River Confluence, again, in the interest of just making sure that our efforts here really align with other existing efforts moving forward.
Sounds good. Thanks for the welcome, guys.
Thank you.
It's great to see all this energy coming forward in terms of watershed-wide health for the river. The confluence started as an idea in 2016 and then sort of took a back seat in 2017 and 18 when there were fires and other disasters happening. And we brought it back to life starting in 2000. The idea came back in 2019 and we created an MOU and the Russian River Respect campaign over the last year and a half. So that's just a quick timeline. The idea behind it is exactly what you guys are talking about, which is that there's a lot going on within the river. We need to have better engagement tools with the community and with the stakeholders. We need to have better coordination between different agencies doing work within the river. And we need to tackle some of these big problems. So the Confluence membership partners agreed that the three top things we wanted to work on were the water supply, climate resiliency, and watershed health. So some of those things are being done elsewhere. So obviously collaborating with the Water Forum on water supply is a key piece of that. There is also great work being done by the Russian River Regional Monitoring Program, R3MP, to start doing some watershed-wide health metrics. So we want to do everything we can to support that. And we've been working quite a bit in terms of the community engagement and the cross-agency collaboration. What that has taken shape as is we have the Respect Russian River campaign, which is a line of merchandise and branding, which has gone out and about. It was really exciting to me to get an email from REI that they've completely sold out of all our products. So we're working along the line of the model of Keep Tahoe Blue to just start getting the word out as much as possible in terms of the need of the river and the needs of the river and the engagement. We're working to through our website to become a hub for various issues. At the moment, you see there information about the river and information about the Respect Russian River campaign. The issues stuff will start coming up in the next couple months. We've just lined up resources in order to be able to do that. So what we'll do is we'll talk about the water forum and how to participate or get more information or all those sorts of things. So our goal is with our partners to be able to lift up the information that's out there and the work that's being done out there and aim funds, aim donations, aim volunteers, aim awareness towards all the great work being done. Along those same lines, we're also working to help create collaborations where things are stuck. So we have a meeting tomorrow, for example, and one of the projects we're going to talk about is one that has 5 different agencies involved, and it's a great project and everybody wants to do it, but nobody wants to take charge because it's a big project and they each want to do their area. So what we're going to be working out is some sort of an agreement in terms of who's doing what, who's holding what, where the financing is coming from, and hopefully we can unstick that project and move it forward. So that's one of the great things that can happen when we have good collaboration between organizations. Like you, we're also trying to figure out how can we get people working and convening around and more knowledgeable around how to support the river. We have an unusual situation in that so much of the river is owned by private landowners. And so we're working on a project to convene landowners and help educate them on how to do a good job themselves in repairing corridor. And I'd really like to strengthen and move that forward. So that's kind of a top level overview of all the things we're attempting to do. We have the memorandum of understanding is on our website, and if there are any organizations that have not yet signed that and want to become one of the partners, you're welcome to do so. There's not a lot of requirement to it. It's just you sign on and then you become a partner on the website and then you get invited to the meetings. So it's not a huge commitment, but we'd love to have everybody participating because the more input we get, the better we can do. And obviously we're having a good time working with our water forum partners and also our 3MP to figure out how we can do this stuff together, because we don't want to have 3 organizations all stepping on each other. What we really want to do is to figure out how to best take the puzzle pieces and work well together.
Thanks so much, Elise. I could not agree more. I think a big part of what we want to start working on today is figuring out how those puzzle pieces come together. So with that, Ben, unless you have anything to add, I'm going to pass it over to you for the visioning exercise.
No, I just wanted to see if anyone has any questions for Elise about what he's working on. We have a little time to answer those, but if not, we can move to the next segment here. Okay. All right. Well, thanks again, Elise, and we really do look forward to working with you on this and figuring out how we can kind of team up on I think a lot of shared goals here.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. So what we want to do now is sort of hone in a little bit on when we say resiliency, what we mean, and therefore what should this group be focusing on. And we did start this conversation at the July planning group meeting. And we also want the participants of the subcommittee to really sort of drive the work moving forward. So to some extent, it's going to be a little bit of a repeat, but maybe we can go to the next slide. What we'd like to do, and I believe Tom sent these out yesterday, but we have 4 questions that, you know, just a kind of high level vision, and this is going to move towards what the subcommittee's role could or should be. The questions that we want to pose to the group are, first, sort of just the vision. Let's say it's 2040, 17 years from now. What does a resilient river basin look like? And if we also want to incorporate sustainability or proactivity, you can plug that in there as well. But really, what's the end goal, or an interim end goal that we're driving towards? So that's the first question. The second question is, what are the challenges? And so, you know, Lisa, you'd mentioned all the private property, and that's a challenge in some respects. But what are the challenges, and what can we do to address them? And then when we say resiliency, what specifically are we talking about? So, you know, supply is certainly part of it. And then we've also heard a variety of other topics that could potentially fall within resiliency. So that can include water quality, it can include conservation or habitat development, demand reduction. There are a lot of subtopics that could be, you know, could fall within this larger topic. So we want to get a good sense of the group. We don't have it figured out today, but we want to get a sense from folks of what you feel should be covered, and if there's anything that seems, you know, too broad, it'd be good to know that too. And then finally, how can this group, recognizing that there are other existing groups and individual jurisdictions are also doing their own projects and planning efforts, but what can this subcommittee most effectively contribute to, and how can it do that? So those are kind of the 4 questions we wanted to bring to this group to really do a little bit of scoping around, you know, what the role and kind of timeline and milestones might be for this subcommittee, and then we'd want to figure out how this rolls up to the planning group. But what we're going to do is, we have used a Miro board in the past in planning group meetings. We'd like to do that again. And so, Henry, I'll invite you to share your screen with the Miro board. And I think we're also going to put the Miro board in the chat. So in order to participate and put your comments in the Miro board, you need to open it on your end. Everyone does. So Tom, if you could put the link in the chat, and then Henry, if you can share your screen, and we can zoom into the first one, question 1. So you zoom in a little bit. So in order to fill in your comment, you just click on one of those sticky notes. Maybe Henry, you can do a quick test. Just click on it. And type in your comment. So, and then you can also, after you type it in, if you see a comment that seems related or overlapping, you can kind of, we're going to try to group them a little bit to see what key themes emerge. So what we'd like to do is to have everyone take about 5 or 6 minutes. There are those 4 questions are on Miro boards, so you can kind of pan around to find those 4 boxes. And then there's another box just for other thoughts and ideas that we'd love to have you put other ideas in as well. So please just take some time. So everyone who's here, you're invited to add as many thoughts as you have. Please have 1 idea per sticky note so we can move things around. And then, and if you're having any trouble with the Miro board, just put that in the chat. You can also put your comments in the chat, and we'll put them on the sticky board on the Miro board. Just make sure we know what question you're answering. But we're happy to, if you're having any trouble, you can just put it in the chat and we can get it up there for you. So I see people are already getting rolling, which is great. Does anybody have any questions before we sort of just let you go here? Okay. So yeah, well, let's take, we're just going to keep our eye on the Miro board. And then when the comments start to slow down a little bit, we'll reconvene here and just look at what we get, and then we can just have a discussion around the themes that emerge. Okay.
Well, I'm seeing that someone is having trouble moving around the board to other sections. In order to do that, you probably will need to use your trackpad if you have one on a laptop, or your scroller on an external mouse with the shift button to go side to side.
I just want to jump in and clarify, if it wasn't clear, we're just asking folks to, it looks like folks are already doing that, but we want to just have everyone respond to all questions now, and then we'll go through all of them together. Okay, let's have folks take maybe 2 or 3 more minutes, and then we'll go through them, and we can continue to add to this. So it's not a final answer here. Still see a couple folks writing, but I think we can get started. And so what we'd like to do is just go question by question here. We did kind of an initial grouping just to see what key themes emerged, and there might be others that folks want to offer up. So I think what I'll do is just ask Henry if you can share your screen, and let's go to the first question. And just let us know what are some of the key themes where you saw some, a fair number of comments, and we can kind of open it up to the group from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And recognizing that these are small, I'm going to try to zoom in and move around as needed. So moving from the top, you have some suggestions for what farms could be doing, including soil water holding capacity, using purple pipe water whenever possible. Down here on the bottom left, you've got some suggestions that diversions are metered, reported, and coordinated. You've got a bunch of suggestions about adequate supply and drought, and making sure that people and habitats, fisheries, etc., have water, sufficient water, even through drought and climate change. There are a few suggestions about water efficiency and water conservation. One person suggested that water users be required to participate in demand management in an equitable way. And then we heard a lot about fisheries and habitats and making sure that the river ecosystem is sustainable and healthy, and that all of the living beings that depend on it are as well, especially fish. And then over here on the right, we've got some ideas for policies and best practices. For example, LID practices. Could someone share what LID is for everyone?
Low impact design.
Low impact design. Thank you, Don. So low impact design practices, practices and infrastructure to withstand major flooding events. Of course, we saw this year the danger there. So a few different themes, and I just wanted to open up to discussion. What else was on people's minds? What other themes are you all seeing here? We also see a few mentions of equity and equitable water availability.
Yeah, that looks like a good list.
All right, and one of the things that we'll do coming out of this is do some further organization and make sure that we've properly categorized all of these suggestions. Moving on to the second one, Ben.
Yeah, I'll just highlight a few of the I guess the key themes that I picked up here. One being, if you scroll down bottom left, Henry, there's a lot about information. So in the lack of information and how that's a challenge. So use data, when diversions are occurring, where water losses are occurring, why, how much water is in the system, how much water is being taken from the system. And a need for real-time metering. So I think just hearing a bunch of comments around either the data not being available, or perhaps folks don't have access to it, but that's a challenge that would need to be addressed. As we scroll right, some comments around funding. So just recognizing that funding is limited, and there need to be contributions by everyone who benefits, and then with a lack of economic diversity, also a challenge. As we keep going right, there's sort of a collaboration and governance theme here, a lack of collaboration, and just recognizing there's different jurisdictions that need to coordinate across the basin or even across the basins to be able to share resources and get things done. So, and the other thing is just understanding what are the existing restrictions or regulations that are already in place, and how those are kind of affecting the system. If you scroll up a little bit, just a few that we had a couple challenges that are that they're all important, but not as many themes. There saw a comment around water rights and that they're complicated, and it's not exactly clear what the what's being complied with versus not. Illegal diversions, weak enforcement, and of course just limitations on water supply availability. So also a challenge to resiliency. So I know there are other ones that are on there. Those are kind of the key themes that I picked up. If anyone has any observations or things you'd like to add or any questions about any of the comments, I invite you to weigh in. But I think these challenges all make sense. And I imagine that folks' wheels might start turning around. How would you address these challenges? So I think this gives us a good baseline here. Okay. Let's go to question 3. Was this, Tom, did you organize this one?
Yeah, I did.
Do you want to just talk us through this?
Yeah, sure. So I have some themes that we saw on this one were conjunctive uses of water supplies that came up several times. Another one was about just supply and demand broadly, whether it be demand reduction or focus on water supply. We also saw water quality come up a lot, water quality improvements, recharge, whether it be on a watershed scale or through stormwater. And then we saw nature-based solutions come in and low-tech process-based restoration on the end. And we had metering, reporting, monitoring. We had several people talk about collaboration, the importance of public outreach and education. And then we had a lot of people talk about conservation and the importance of having restoration projects in order to provide system-wide benefits. And yeah, for the majority of the buckets that we saw.
Just out of curiosity, any topics that folks are not seeing on here that is either surprising or you think should be added? All right.
All right. We appreciate the Miro activity and focus on that. Thank you. For question number 4, how can the subcommittee most effectively contribute to achieving the vision of resiliency? The most answers received were about a collaboration hub, really like coordinating, figuring out how to support each other's projects, provide a forum for information exchange and discussion and challenges that might require regional or basin-wide solutions. There's also some interest in identifying and what the actions are and trying to implement as best as possible. We've also got, sort of in the same vein, identifying the list of projects. We have one suggestion to prioritize between different projects and rank them. And then we've got a few suggestions about creating a shared vision, specific and concrete goals, defining resiliency and the scope of our work, and what we will work on, what we won't work on. And some still coming through. I love this one, through education, empower citizens in the watershed to act. Definitely heard a lot today about the importance of education and outreach. I see one that says, find the money. No projects will happen if there is no money. And one about equity across the watershed to bring in all people. Any other things that are missing here? Any other suggestions about what the subcommittee could be doing to most effectively realize a shared vision of resiliency?
Yeah, maybe one thing we'll want to think about as we dive a little bit more deeply into this. I'm thinking of at least your work and the work of others of all these ideas. Which of these are already being addressed, and therefore maybe the subcommittee would be, its best use of time would be focusing on the other things. We don't have to figure that out now, but again, I do think we want to just look across the landscape and understand, what's already being set up that can help achieve some of these, and where should this group in particular focus its energy, so we're covering as much of the need as possible here.
All right.
Great.
Let's see.
Okay.
Did
Well,
we
yeah.
get
Thanks,
anything in
everyone.
the
I don't think
other ideas?
Maybe we've got one in there.
I do see team with science foundation. That one's still in progress. To get the best available science, definitely. There'll be technical and scientific needs that might come up, and having expertise to work on that would be really helpful. Okay. Thank you all so much for participating in this. Ben, I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So what we'll do is we can make this available, and we'll keep this open for at least a week or so. So if folks want to continue to add ideas, we can send it out, the link again out via email. But I think what we'll do is, after we get the comments about as set as they're going to be, we'll summarize them, and the next meeting we can come back with some of the, again, kind of a synthesis of what we heard. But this is helpful. I think it gives us an idea, kind of a temperature check. It's not the final answer, but just what's on folks' minds, and what you all want to be addressing here with this group. So we appreciate your feedback here. Yeah, let's go to the next piece.
So up next, kind of building off of some of those suggestions, we're going to have a conversation about the focus and potential work products for this resiliency subcommittee. So for this one, our discussion is going to be out loud and in Zoom. So we'd invite you to come on camera if you would like to, and you can just use the raise hand function if you want to jump in. So some of the potential activities that we had heard before this were identifying resiliency goals and measurable objectives, existing programs and actions, and documenting what those programs and actions achieved or will achieve, identifying future or needed additional programs and actions, doing an accurate water accounting. We heard interest in that. Heard a lot of interest in this prior to this meeting and today, in inter and intra-region collaboration and education. And then also a lot of interest in identifying funding for resiliency efforts. Those in addition to some of the ideas that we've heard today. So I want to pose a few questions to this group, and then I'm hoping we can just have some open conversation about this and get to some answers. First, what type of work product or products could the subcommittee produce? Who is the audience for the work product? And how should the work be organized? Who will do the heavy lifting? And I note that in our water rights working group, we do have a smaller work product focused group that meets in between the bigger meetings and drives some of the work forward. So that's a possibility here. But I want to hear from you all what you think about these questions.
And I guess one thing I'd add before we jump into it is that there don't necessarily have to be work products or reports or plans that are developed. And so it's also entirely possible that the outcome is collaboration, or it's folks knowing what everyone else is doing. But just recognizing to the extent that would be helpful, we think it would also be helpful to think through how we could collectively get that done. Elise, I see you have your hand up.
Well, given that we're putting so much work into making our website a hub, it would be great to be fed information for our newsletter and our website for of key projects that are going on, issues that we should be highlighting, events we should be sending out to people, volunteer opportunities, any really breakthrough projects that are happening. So anything along those lines would be great if the committee would send those things over to us so that we can disseminate them and get them out.
Yeah, that makes total sense, Elise. And I wonder if, in terms of partnering together, it could make sense, for example, for the Confluence to be the kind of communicator out, and that we sort of help provide content, and you be like kind of the Confluence be kind of like the megahorn that gets it out, and perhaps the Resiliency Subcommittee performs a complementary role but doesn't do the same thing.
Right.
If that makes sense. So folks aren't getting 2 emails that say the same thing from
right.
2 different organizations. So I think it gets to the kind of mapping out who does what, but I like that idea of having like a funnel of content that you can then send out, and making sure that lists are aggregated so we're getting out to as many people as possible one time.
Absolutely. Thanks.
In the chat, Terry, I'm seeing economic planning and development of low water use industries and businesses. You want to elaborate on that a bit?
Hello. Yeah. It seems like if we can find other economic opportunities to replace some of the more water intensive industries that are using water now, it might help the help with the drought and the water availability situation.
Okay. Thank
so
you.
Economic planning, and you would be providing support to such as the West Company and other small businesses that can support these businesses get established and become profitable and a part of the community.
Okay, thanks for that, Terry. Kathy, I see you.
Yeah, and actually on that last point, I understand there's a whole lot of money for economic development in this region, lots, that the West Company would be aware of. But I'm with the RCD in Mendocino County, and we've been doing a lot of kind of work where people, supporting people to use less water, where they, but it's been focused on the Navarro River. But we've been working with different, and all our work is pretty much grant funded. So I think that we could help develop a list of where we've gotten money for what kinds of activities, and others could do that as well. The Nature Conservancy has particularly taken an interest in Navarro because of the coho salmon, but I think that there are potential grantors that we should become aware of, including the State Water Board. Yeah, and the other product I think is going to be important is, because we've brought up funding, is that we're going to have to figure out a timeline for getting the public aware enough, because there probably will have to be some voting in terms of a special district forming, and what kind of timeline that would entail to help cover costs. So that's just another.
Kathy, just to clarify, what would be the focus of the special district?
To not set fines, but to people that divert are going to have a way to pay for their diversions. And so it would be, just we need to kind of map out how money would be collected from the diverters, and that probably will require the formation of some special districts along parts of the Russian River. I mean, that's what I'm seeing, and we need to kind of look ahead to see the logistics of how that would have to be formed and what kind of a timeline. Anytime, I mean, I know Mendocino County has been very resistant to passing taxes on itself, so it's just a reality too.
Thanks for that. Let's go to John and then Adrian.
Kathy, hey, great comments. Adrian, I suppose you're going to talk about the formation of the Alexander Valley Irrigation District, so I won't cover that. But there's, if we can't form special districts, there definitely needs to be really close by-county watershed-wide collaboration, specifically on Kathy, around programs we work on. I'm with the Sonoma RCD around regional permitting processes where we could go ahead and have a blanket permit in which projects can be placed under, rather than going through the process of having to permit each individual activity, each individual watershed project. And that would also help with reducing cost and streamlining processes for the type of work that needs to be done in the forest and in the land. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Adrian?
Yes, I'll give a brief update on where we are here in Alexander Valley with creating some programs. One of the things that we're working on is creating a water district for Alexander Valley. That's been moving along for the last couple of years. So we are finalizing our application documents and our plan of service and some of those, and then figuring out whether we go through LAFCO or potentially the legislative option. I also, with Pepperwood and other partners, applied for some grant funding. And one of the products will be a resilience roadmap for Alexander Valley. And then I'm also looking at a NOAA grant coming up to potentially work on our main channel issues here in Alexander Valley. So looking at flood resilience, which can also incorporate doing gravel management, floodplain restoration and expansion, and a number of other things. And then, of course, we have our on-farm recharge project that is funded and is being developed, and hopefully we'll be doing some recharge in a couple of key areas in the 24-25 winter.
So just to maybe to pull a few thoughts together, and we're, as we can't help ourselves, we're facilitators. At Kearns and West, thinking about future agendas, it does seem like a couple things that we're hearing a lot of interest in is one is just the information sharing. So what projects are either have been developed and what have been the outcomes of those projects, what projects are being conceived and what are they intended to do. And then perhaps information sharing about information, like what information is out there around water use and or other things, and where are there gaps, and I think that to begin is what's the baseline of what we know is already out there. So I think that's an important piece that I imagine would, from what we've heard so far, would be a thread that would continue at least in the foreseeable future. And then I think there's a piece, and Adam, I see your comments in the chat around, you know, to what extent are the projects as they're being currently designed, are they not, are they, where do we need to have a broader sort of collaboration, whether that's between counties or across jurisdictions, and what would those collaborative sort of larger projects address, and how can the subcommittee play some role in either getting the idea sort of off the ground or some way to help move it forward. So those are two things that I'm seeing, that where there's, you know, there could be some real interest and benefit around sharing information around projects, or just sort of what the system's doing. And then sort of being a bit of a think tank or sort of a lab for coming up with these broader region-wide projects to address some of these resiliency needs. And that's not an exhaustive list, but those are two things that I'm certainly hearing. Other thoughts in terms of, you know, what this group could work on, and how it would, I mean, I think we're also interested in how it would get done, recognizing that you all are all, you know, very busy and have important jobs, and we want to make sure that if there is a real interest in things getting done, that we have the collective capacity to do that.
Jamie, I see you on camera. Would you like to share?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to make up my mind. But so I guess listening to everyone's comments and seeing everyone's comments in the chat, one thing that I kind of just want to bring up as important to go back to is that one of the big issues that's kind of ongoing in our watershed is data gaps. And in order to really tackle some of these problems, like figure out the benefits that we're getting from these projects, which projects are going to be more impactful watershed wide on a long-term basis versus short-term basis, like we really need to figure out a path forward to address and close these data gaps so that we can actually inform and more just more actively pursue these other projects. We're going to have just so much more information to base our decisions on, and we just need a solid base for that. So I would strongly encourage that we really focus on figuring out a path for implementing that, and just really creating that base so that we can start focusing on these other issues.
Yeah, thanks for that comment, Jamie. I'm wondering, and that's a question where I have around both identifying the data gaps and then addressing the data gaps. To what extent can that be sort of managed and addressed by the subcommittee versus the subcommittee would need to identify some resources to bring in, you know, for example, technical consultants, or, you know, John's comment about science foundations. But just thinking about, like, can the subcommittee do that, or is it sort of that's a much bigger thing that has to be done, and so we would need to think about, like, how to strategize around that bigger effort. I'm kind of curious, Jamie, what you think and what others think as well.
I think that's a very convoluted question, but I think a lot of it. So there's a lot of different ways to address the implementation of different things that are needed to close the data gaps. So there's volunteer efforts, like with the voluntary sharing program. There are efforts there. The State Water Board is working on programs to help improve and close some of these data gaps, but those are on a much more extensive timeline. They're not really going to help us now. And I think that's just something that is going to need more discussion, just because there are so many interests involved, and there are it's kind of because there's like the voluntary methods of working towards implementing and furthering those interests, but then there's also the like regulatory methods that we could start researching and working to achieve implementation. So it's kind of a two pathway scenario.
Got it. Thanks for that. Jay, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the data gaps because I think it's an important point, and just highlight the Russian River Independent Science Review Panel and their work from a few years past. I think it does a pretty good job. It could probably be updated, but I think it's a good source of information and a good framework to work off of.
Great, thanks for that, Jay. Yeah, and I think that we mentioned the kind of the existing projects matrix that we're going to ask folks to add to. I mean, our hope is to have an inventory of kind of everything that's relevant at a high level, and then we can decide on where we want to get into more detail. But I'm thinking it would be helpful to have a sheet that's part of there that's just like what's the existing data and what's the source, and just so we can kind of again have it all in place. What do we know either from individual reports or kind of collaboratives and the data that's being produced, but just so we're all tracking what's out there. And then if after doing that inventory, it's like, oh yes, we're still missing the following things, we can figure out where to go from there. Okay. Other thoughts? Want to, and again, we'll keep touching on this, but I do think that we're starting to get some ideas around, at least initially, what this group will want to focus on, and I think it's really kind of mapping out the landscape to start, and just sharing information, and then also doing some active coordination across existing groups to identify clear roles and leverage each other's networks and resources and things like that. Okay. All right. So I do want to turn to the third question of how the work should be organized and who would do the heavy lifting. And we're going to get to a discussion of co-chairs. As Henry had mentioned, for the water rights working group, in addition to co-chairs, there's also a core working group. And we have found that to be pretty helpful in terms of getting an actual deliverable coming out of that group. So there's a number of people that are devoting some time to getting that done. So just want to send out some feelers now. If folks feel like either you feel like, yes, something like that would be needed to get things done, either if you're interested in raising your hand for that, or if you just feel like it's needed and someone needs to do it, it would be helpful to know that, because I do think we need to do a little bit of, we need to sort of just true up like what folks feel needs to be done with the capacity that's actually available, if that makes sense. So I don't know if folks have any thoughts on that, but we do want to make sure that if we're identifying goals, that we have the kind of capacity to get there. Okay. We'll ask this question again, so you don't have to say yes now. Okay, let's talk about co-chairs. And Henry, was this you or me?
I can talk about it.
Okay.
Basically, the role of the co-chair, as we see it, and we're open to other suggestions as well, is to work with us, the facilitation team, to help plan the subcommittee meeting agendas and coordinate with presenters. So if people are sharing out information, coordinating with those folks, supporting the coordination and information sharing between the subcommittee and the planning group, and across working groups. So one way that plays out is participating in report outs during planning group meetings. So if you went to the last meeting, you would have seen a report out from David Tabor, who's one of the co-chairs of the water rights working group. Communicating with subcommittee members between meetings as needed. So if we need specific information from someone on the subcommittee, the co-chair would be helping with that. Co-chairs are not, however, expected to be decision makers or to lead the subcommittee meetings. So that's the role. Any suggestions about other things the role might entail? Or Ben, any context that you'd want to add?
I don't think so. No, I mean, just that, you know, it is really helpful for the facilitation team to have co-chairs to coordinate with, bounce ideas off of, to kind of co-plan agendas. And then, you know, in terms of facilitating the meetings and doing the lifting, that the facilitation team does that. It's just really helpful to have the co-chairs who can help with the communication between groups and out to the planning group, and just sort of be partners on it. And so we have received interest from 3 people. So, and I believe all 3 are on the line. So Jamie from Russian Riverkeeper, Jay from Sonoma Water, and Adam from Redwood Valley County Water District. I don't think we're limited by 2, so we can have more than 2 if there's interest in that. And so if anyone else is interested in being considered for a co-chair, please let us know now, because we would like to sort of to lock this in now so we can know who we're going to be working with. So is anyone else interested in having this role? Okay. And then what I'll ask is, you know, we would, I'd say from our perspective, it would be totally fine and appropriate to have 3 co-chairs. And I want to see if anyone is uncomfortable with that or has any concerns with that. Because if everyone is okay with it, I would just propose that, you know, Jay, Jamie, and Adam, we consider them our co-chairs here, and then we kind of take it from there. We can always, you know, we can add folks if that becomes an interest, but I want to see if anyone has any comments or thoughts on that or any reservations. It seems like a good group here. Okay. Okay. Well, we'll call that the will of the group. And if you have any follow-up thoughts, feel free to let us know, but we're going to proceed with that. So thanks everyone for your consideration. All right, so we'll probably end a little early. We don't have too much more we need to cover for today. We do want to talk through the next steps, so we can go through the next slide. We will provide a summary. We're going to send that out hopefully within about a week. This meeting is being recorded, and so we'll get that recording up on the Water Forum website soon, so folks can share that or rewatch it if you like. And then you'll get the summary. But I think this is a really helpful initial conversation. I'm sure we'll get a little bit more texture to what's going to happen when and all of that. But I think this gives us a good kind of initial framework to work with. The next planning group meeting is coming up next Thursday in Ukiah. It's also accessible via Zoom. So we'll give a report out from what this group discussed, and we'll be coordinating with the co-chairs to see if you all can help us with that report out. And then the next Resiliency Subcommittee meeting, we haven't talked about that, and so that might be something that we talk about before we close here. And then finally, the homework is our request to you all is to take a look at that Google sheet and plug in any programs or plans or anything that's relevant that you think is missing. You can send us an email and we can put it in the matrix ourselves. But again, we're trying to just do as exhaustive an inventory as possible, so we know it's all in one place. And then I think what we talked about in addition to that was, you know, an understanding of funding resources. I think that would be useful too, so we can add that as well. So I do want to ask the question of frequency here, and recognizing that folks are busy and that there's a lot of interest. I think we have probably a range here of in terms of frequency of monthly to all the way to quarterly. But want to get a sense from folks of what do you think is a frequency that would be both manageable and help move things forward. Our thinking it's probably monthly, but we do want to test that out and make sure that folks are generally on the same page. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
And if you give me 1 second, I can pull up a poll and then people can vote.
Okay.
All right. You should have just had a poll pop up with the options of monthly, every other month, and quarterly. And then what we'll do with this information after we get it is we'll send out a doodle poll for a recurring time at whatever frequency the group prefers, which right now is looking like monthly, followed by every other month. And we'll gauge people's availability for a monthly call at a standard time.
I guess the thing I'd add is we will schedule monthly calls if it looks like we want to skip a meeting. We can do that too. So but I think it's always helpful to have the meeting on the calendar. We can take it off if we need to. So we will follow up to get hopefully a standing meeting that works for as many people as possible. Okay. All right. So I think we're good in terms of what we were hoping to achieve for this initial kickoff meeting. I wonder if anyone has any other final thoughts before we close. We do have some time to take those, or any questions, but otherwise we really appreciate people jumping on, and you can always follow up with the facilitation team with any comments or ideas or concerns. We'd certainly love to hear from you on that,
as well as if you're interested in being on a smaller working group.
Yes, door is always open. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone, and have a good rest of your afternoon, and we'll be back in touch shortly.
Thanks.
Thank you.